Bruce Johnson. I've been working with wood for more than 30 years. First as your typical do-it-yourselfer, then as a full-time professional furniture refinisher and woodworker. More recently, I've been teaching people like yourself what I've learned about working with wood through my books, magazine articles, and television appearances. And one of the things I've learned is that wood finishing is fun and easy, regardless of whether you're getting ready to tackle your first project or whether you're an experienced woodworker. Once you get a handle on the basics of wood finishing, the scope of your projects is only going to be limited by your imagination. Before long, you'll be working on unfinished furniture, antiques, doors, trim, cabinets, perhaps even your hardwood floors. And by being able to choose your own stain and finish, you're going to be able to customize each piece so it turns out exactly the way you imagined it would. Now, when it comes to wood finishing, I rely on Minwax. Minwax has been making stains and finishes for more than 100 years, and they offer a wide variety of products that will make each project easy and will help you achieve beautiful results. Well, today I'm in my workshop outside Asheville, North Carolina, where I'm going to take you through the basic steps of wood finishing. First, we're going to talk about how to pick the proper workplace. Then we're going to talk about proper preparation of your wood before you apply a stain or finish. We'll then go through how to pick a stain, how to pick a finish, and the best way to apply each of them. We'll then take a look at the one-step stain and finish combinations. And finally, I'll give you some tips on how to keep all the wood in your home looking beautiful for years to come. Well, that sounds like a lot of material to cover, so let's get started. Before you get started on any wood finishing project, it's always a good idea to make sure you picked out the best possible place to be working and you've gathered together the basic supplies you're going to be needing for each of your projects. Now, when it comes time to picking out where you're going to work, there are a couple criteria you want to keep in mind. First, you want to make sure you've always got a good stream of fresh air moving through the area. You also want to make sure you're not working someplace where there's a lot of excessive dust. If you've been doing a lot of sanding or cleanup in your area, let the dust settle or vacuum it up before you start doing your staining and finishing. That way the dust won't end up in your project. You also want to make sure you've got good light. You don't want to get to the end of your project and figure out you've missed a spot or you've got some runs or drips simply because you didn't have a good enough light in there. A couple other considerations you want to keep in mind, and this would especially apply if you're thinking about working in your basement. You want to make sure the humidity is going to stay around 50%, and you want to keep that temperature ideally between 65 and 85 degrees. Anytime that temperature starts to get too low or the humidity gets too high, it affects our drying times. It's just going to slow your project down a little bit. So keep that in mind. Pick out a good place to work, whether that's in the corner of your garage or your basement, and that's going to make things go a lot better. Now, we're also going to want to keep some safety precautions in mind as well. You may prefer to wear safety glasses anytime you're putting on your stains or finishes, and you may want to slip on some gloves to protect your hands when you're doing your staining as well. It's always a good idea to keep an old can with a lid around that you can fill about halfway up with water to put all your rags and steel wool in. Then when you're done with that project, seal that up and check with your local regulations on how you should properly dispose of that. Now, just about any refinishing or wood finishing project is going to need some basic materials that you need to have around because you don't want to get halfway through your project and find out you've got to stop, lay your brush down, and rush off and get some project materials you should have had on hand. So things I like to have around all the time begin with a drop cloth, or perhaps even two drop cloths. Many times I want to protect the top of my workbench, and I want to protect the floor as well, especially if we're working on a piece of furniture that won't fit on top of your workbench. Spread your drop cloth off down the floor, put the project down there, and that way you won't get any stain or finish on the floor around you. Also a good idea to have a good supply of stirring sticks around as well. The stains and finishes you're going to be using have a tendency to settle out. And you want to make sure you stir those both when you're getting started and if the project's going to take several hours, to stir them up while you're working as well. Of course, you're going to need a way of getting those cans open, so you want to have a screwdriver or a special opener around. And you're going to need some brushes. If you're working with water-based products, you're going to use a synthetic bristle brush. If you're working with oil-based products, then you're going to switch over to a natural bristle brush. And on rare occasion, you'll be using the inexpensive disposable foam brushes, but there'll be more coming on that just a little bit later. For rags, you can either use the heavy-duty paper towels or you can use cloth rags. But either way, make sure it's going to be a lint-free rag. The last thing you want to have happen is to have little pieces of thread end up in your stain or your finish, because if you do, it's going to make it look not as well as it could have. And keep on hand a little bit of steel wool. We don't use steel wool very often, but every now and then you're going to have a product that needs to be rubbed out with steel wool. So keep some fine steel wool on hand. Also, when you're working with your oil-based products, you're going to want to have some mineral spirits around to clean out your brushes so you can save those and reuse them for the next time. And finally, you're going to need just a little bit of sandpaper. Now, I'm not a big fan of over-sanding anything, so my sandpaper needs are very simple. For removing any dents or small nicks I might have in the wood I'm working with, I keep some 120 sandpaper around. And for my final sanding, I step up to number 220 sandpaper. This is a good sandpaper for giving you a nice smooth finish on top of the wood, and I also use it for sanding out between coats of clear finish to get professional results. So there you have it. You pick your workspace, you make sure you've got good ventilation, you've got control of your temperature and humidity, dust-free area always helps, plenty of light, make sure you've got your safety precautions on hand, and then gather together just those materials you're going to need for any project, and that's going to make sure that anything you get started, you can finish with great results.